Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Jeff Richard, who is the Vice President and Creative Director of Chaosium, and I asked him to tell me what the three weirdest things in Glorantha are. I'm going to jump across to that interview in just a moment, but first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.
All right. Well, asking me what the weirdest thing in Glorantha is a pretty tall order, Jamie, because we're talking about a setting that has a giant sleeping cow as a range of hills and a big block that rolled across the landscape and weird wheels rolling through the sky dome. Not to mention that it's flat and it's possible to sail off the edge of the world. But even with all that put together, I'd say the three weirdest things at Glorantha. Number one are the Maidstone archers, the Grotaron. These are weird three-armed dudes that have their faces in the center of their chests and their abdomens, and they've got one arm. Each of their arms has an eyeball on their hand, and they use these huge bows that they're strong enough to pull because they're actually small giants, and they shoot things with these giant bows. But their religion is all around hunting an invisible mammoth spirit that their spirit selves run off, and that they've got to be probably the weirdest and trippiest and most entertaining non-human sentient species I've ever seen. And I'm talking they blow away things as weird as puppeteers and the giant Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. So Maidstone archers all the way, man.
What's the chances of coming across one of these in play? If I hear about this and I really want to go to an area, what can I steer my game master towards if I want to catch a glimpse of them?
Well, of course, you're going to find them in the Maidstone Mountains of Frenella near the Valence Glacier. But honestly, a good GM from time to time should make sure that your players run into a Maidstone archer wherever they are, because anyone that can hunt invisible mammoth spirits, they can show up wherever. They're just too cool not to use.
So what about one of the other weird things then? What's next on your mind?
Well, the number two weirdest feature of Glorantha is one of my favorites, and it is the humble duck people of Dragon Pass. And these guys, people either love the little duck people or they hate the little duck people. I for one love them, and I love the fact that we don't have hobbits or second-rate Tolkien ripoffs that somebody filed the serial numbers off. Now we've got sentient anthropomorphic ducks that worship the gods of war and death and storm, and they live their little lives, and they play some sort of mysterious and important role in maintaining the borders between our world and the undead marsh of Delecti the Necromancer. But no one gives them credit because they're ducks, and at the end of the day, ducks are ridiculous and weird. So that's why they're my number two weirdest thing in Glorantha.
So ducks are something that are very familiar to a lot of long-term Glorantha fans, but I think that new players and people who are sort of just peripherally aware of the game are a little surprised by them. Can you give us a piece of information about the ducks that is relevant to new players, and then maybe one that even old school Glorantha players might not know?
Oh, well, actually, the bit of information that I would suggest is that with the ducks, they should always be an opportunity to mix the ridiculous with the sublimely tragic. They are both incredibly funny, because how can you not have a sense of humor when you're dealing with an anthropomorphic little duck that's carrying around a sword? Juan Sfar, the French comic book author, uses them to great effect in Donjon. I think it's Donjon, his fantasy series. People of my age remember Howard the Duck before it was a bad Spielberg Lucasfilm. There's something, not to mention, DuckTales and all, and Duckburg and all of that. There's something ridiculous about it. But now you put them in Glorantha, and there's at the same time there's something sad and tragic about them. Here they are, they they don't even know their own origins. They can't fly. They're forced to deal with humans that don't treat them seriously. Yeah, there's this wonderful bit where you get to tell a sad story of tragedy and sacrifice, and the whole time you and your players are snickering about it. And that's something that is a bit of information is use them, accept that they're ridiculous, but use them also to convey some pathos and tragedy, and you'll love them.
I love that. I think that's great. So for the final point, I want to give a bit of a challenge to you. Can you think of, for your final weird thing, something that even the most hardcore Gloranthan scholar is maybe not going to know right off the top of their head? Something that might be surprising to even longtime fans.
Well, I was thinking maybe it's some of the weirdness of the writing and creation of the setting. But, actually, one of the things that I think is just plain weird is there is a floating island in Glorantha called Kylarella. That's right. You've never even heard of this. This is the floating island Kylarella, and it's an island that is not allowed. It's a landmass that cannot ever be on land. So it floats in the seas, and it floats because Kylarella, who was a daughter of, I can't remember, a daughter of an earth goddess, because it's so many different stories. So for the purposes of this story, we'll say she's one of the daughters of Azralia, the great goddess of wealth and one of the great earth goddesses. And so Kylarella was one of the favorite daughters, maybe after Ernalda, beloved by Azralia and the other goddesses. But she fell in love with the ugliest god in the world, and that was Golod, the fish god, who, have you ever looked at a fish up close? Those things are ugly. And Golod, the fish god, he was just as ugly as can be, but it didn't matter to Kylarella. She loved him. But to her mother and her sisters, that was totally unacceptable. She was an earth goddess, a queen of the lands, and she fell in love with a fish. And so her mother cursed her, and Kylarella, pulled by swarms and schools of fish, now floats around gently through the oceans of Glorantha, a floating island with God knows what mysteries might be there. And eventually Kylarella and Golod even had a child. And that child was none other than Ermal the trickster, who is the daughter of, or the son, maybe he's the daughter, depending on the day of the week, of land and fish. And that seems to be somehow very appropriate for Ermal. But that's my choice for number 3 weirdest thing in Glorantha: Kylarella, the floating island, and her love story with the fish.
I had no idea about that, and the fact that it comes back to Ermal is just fantastic. Is there a final point? Just in weirdness in general in Glorantha, it's such a rich setting, and there's so much stuff in there, obviously, that is epic and that is grand, but it also has this amazing weirdness to it. Is that weirdness important? Does it make Glorantha special?
I think having a sense of the weird and the absurd is important for any setting, to have a certain amount of excitement and believability. Weird things happen in our world. We push them aside, but weirdness, this is too coincidental to be coincidence. This is too ridiculous to be a real story. And then you look a little bit into it and you realize, oh my God, the actual story is not only that weird, it's weirder than that. And Glorantha gives us a vehicle where we can run wild with crazy, weird ideas, and it's perfectly okay to turn things up to 11. I mean, look at look at the trolls, look at all of the elder races, our plant spirit elves, our dwarves that make canned food and God knows what's inside it. You know, these elements of weirdness are a key part of what I consider to be the excitement of the setting, and also the, at a certain level, our willingness to accept the setting. If it was all po-faced, all straight-faced and serious, and we never turned things up to 11, honestly, I don't think that we would love the setting as much. It's Glorantha constantly has this juxtaposition of deadly serious and ridiculously weird. And I think that speaks to us as people.